it's crazy. I mean, I was on tour with Soilwork, and I got a call that Dave Mustaine wanted to talk to me. So imagine that's like that's like the weirdest, shockingly strange call. Where it's like, who? I'm sorry, like the Dave Mustaine. I mean, it's crazy.
Drum for the Song podcast.
Hello, everybody. This is another episode of Drum for the Song podcast. I am your host, Dane Campbell, and I'm absolutely thrilled and honored to introduce you to today's guest, which is Dirk Verbeuren, who's the current drummer of Megadeth. How cool is that? How are you, Dirk?
I'm doing great, Dane. I'm very pleased to be here chatting with you today. Thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. I understand you've been very busy on tour with Megadeth for the last maybe month or so. So, first of all, how has that gone? How's it been getting back on the road and on tour?
Well, it was nice, to finally go back to do what we love, right? It's been such a strange time for everybody, and we didn't know when we'd be able to go back. But this tour has been, from a standpoint of what you expect from a tour, it's been great. There's been tons of people at every show. Lots of shows were sold out. Obviously, a huge pleasure, to play in front of so many people and just to play with the guys again after all this time. It's been, very rewarding feeling for sure.
Oh, yeah, I imagine it must be amazing. I've been following you for a while now, so I've seen all of your photographs from behind the kit and some great photos of you as well playing. So, yeah, it looks great. The show looks great. And, yeah, I can't wait to catch you guys whenever you're coming to the UK next. Or maybe, as I did mention to you in an email, that we're playing Grass Pop together. So hopefully we'll get to catch up then as well. But, if not beforehand. So that's going to be a great festival next year in Belgium for anyone listening. I'm sure you've heard of it if you live in Europe. But it's an incredible lineup for the whole weekend. Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, we're lucky to be on the same day, myself and Dirk, and yeah, I'm looking forward. It's one of the highlights of next year, I think, for me. And for you,
it's going to be a blast.
Yeah, and for you, because you're actually from Belgium, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, the home country.
That's amazing. I just played a show there on the weekend. Actually, it was called Headbangers Balls Festival. So it's only a small one, like a small indoor thing. So we were supporting a band. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. Orange Goblin. Do you know who they are?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, I know who they are. Yeah.
So they were the headliners. Yeah, they're a great band and friends of ours. So yeah, it was a cool indoor show in Belgium somewhere. I can't remember the name of the town, but it looked nice. But it was raining and it was a bit miserable. But everyone was up for the rock and roll and it was cool. So let's kind of rewind time then. So growing up, how long did you live in Belgium for then? And when did you get into the drums? And can you just tell us about your story of how you discovered the drum kit?
Certainly, yes. I lived in Belgium until I was about, I think I was 11 or 12 years old. I don't remember exactly. And at that point, I hadn't started drumming yet. My first instrument was the violin, actually, believe it or not. I guess at the young age of 6, I expressed to my parents that I wanted to play violin. They had some musical program on offer in the school, and it turns out that my aunt had a violin that she used to play when she was there. So she said, "Well, I'll borrow that to you guys. You can have it for Dirk to practice with." And so I played violin for 6 or 7 years.
Wow. And I remember when I was a kid in school, and the violin seemed like one of the more difficult instruments that you could choose. I don't know. That was my perception of it anyway. Coming from a family of guitars and drums, it was like, oh my God, the violin, you've got a bow and there's no frets, and
right,
and it must be so hard to play accurately and stuff like that. So yeah, well done, man.
Yeah, I remember it being tricky. I remember one of the hardest things for me as a kid that stands out was just the position you needed to have. Because I've always kind of been a slumped over kind of guy. Even when I was younger, I wasn't really paying attention to my posture enough.
I don't think many people do.
Position you have to have with your arm out, and head up straight, and then just it would be really tiring after a while. And I think that's probably how I kind of ended up not playing the violin after a while. So
Fair enough. But I'm sure I guess it was a good start for you, like your musical journey, because I know you play other instruments as well. So going back to the drum kit, so how did you kind of first start playing that then?
Yeah, so I was always into music and always around music. I was very fortunate that my parents both had, a lot of various musical tastes, often had the radio on, which I would, record songs on cassette from the top 30 on Saturday and stuff. And they also had vinyl. So, and my dad would make it a point to introduce me to different things and check this out, listen to this, Zeppelin, whatever, just anything T-Rex. I remember as a big T-Rex fan, obviously stuff like the Beatles and the Stones, all the classics. And so at age 9, when I was still in Belgium, I actually bought my first vinyl myself with my allowance money that they gave me every Sunday or whatever. So I bought Purple Rain. That was the first one.
Oh, cool.
And huge Prince fan still to this day. And so a few years later, my dad got a job in Paris. And so we moved there. And going to an international school outside of Paris really put me in touch with more of the extreme music. At the time I was heavily into hip hop. You can maybe see my Run DMC shirt.
Oh, cool.
I was heavily into that, and Beastie Boys and all that stuff. Public Enemy, LL Cool J, like all the '80s stuff that was getting really big at the time. I loved that, and very beat driven, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, I was also listening to like Europe and Bon Jovi, like AC/DC, whatever was on the radio that was kind of heavy. Also piqued my interest, and of course, you had Kerry King playing, a guitar lead on the first Beastie Boys album. Connections were being made. So, anyways, once in France and in this international school where I was surrounded by a very vast community of people coming from all across the globe, I started having friends from Scandinavia, from the US, from the Netherlands, and that were all into different kinds of music. And we all skateboarded too. So we would all go skate together and stuff would be played on the boombox. And I would start tape trading with people, so I'd hear stuff and be like, what's this? This is killer, oh, that's Metallica. What's this? Oh, Megadeth, Suicidal, Slayer, etc., etc. And so that's how I really got into all the heavy stuff, which then eventually led me to the drums a few years later, because I was just so into the rhythm. And I remember I was always tapping along with the tapes, I played the tapes while I was supposed to be doing homework, but I just had my school stuff in front of me and be like, playing the rhythms on my desk. And so one day my dad goes, don't you think we need to get you like some drum kits so you can do this for real? And I was like, sure, Dad.
That's amazing that they suggested it, because normally it's the kid nagging the parents.
Yeah, always very encouraging. They always welcomed anything I was interested in, whether it was skateboarding or video games or stuff that for some parents would be like, you gotta watch out, he's gonna turn into a mess, But they always somehow just trusted that I would kind of separate right from wrong, I guess. And I guess they were right, because to this day, like I never did drugs, I don't smoke. It's been, I don't drink alcohol for the last 15 years or whatever.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Around the time my wife and I got married, so I'm pretty much a straight edge guy.
Yeah, cool. No, I do like the occasional beer, but yeah, I'm not into any of the other stuff. I've never smoked a cigarette as well, so quite similar. I do still enjoy the odd beer, but I'm not, I don't, like 2 or 3 is enough for me normally. I don't like to kind of lose control. I kind of I like getting that little buzz, and, if I maybe enjoy myself a little bit more then, but yeah, I know how to control it, which is good. But yeah, anyway, that's not important. But no, but cool. That's always great to hear how it worked, and quite interesting that you were into hip hop, because knowing you play like extreme forms of metal, which even I don't know a lot about. In fairness, I was brought up, I guess, with hard rock, classic rock, heavy metal, and I guess the big four, as you've mentioned. And then I had a new metal phase when I was a teenager and stuff like that, because I'm that kind of age. But yeah, in terms of all the extreme stuff, that I know you do a lot of, like grindcore. I don't really understand even what grindcore is exactly, and things like that. So it's quite interesting to speak to you, and I was hoping you might be able to, at least from a drumming point and perspective, maybe explain what the traits are of the kind of different forms of metal that you're involved with, at least. Would you mind doing that for me and maybe some of the other listeners?
I'll try my best. The grindcore thing is funny because even some of the, the purveyors, like I think of people like, obviously old Napalm Death lineups, like Nick Harris is supposedly the one who coined that term back in the day. He used to have all these crazy terms on their records, like Holocaust, whirlwind, tornado, It has like this thing that people nowadays like lovingly will copy, because he was doing all this stuff. But he even doesn't really take that seriously, and then you'll hear people like Jeff Walker from Carcass also kind of laugh about it and be like, I always thought that was a stupid term, grindcore, like what is that even, So, but of course, that's for the people who are on the inside of that movement, which was very much, by the way, in the UK, your country, that's very much where, part of that movement was born. Even though a lot of influences did come from, notably Repulsion here in Michigan, in the US, they were one of the very early bands to kind of push the speed. Because basically, grindcore for me, like to sum it up, it's basically like thrash and death metal, but taken to the extreme, and somehow with more punk in it, and varying degrees of that. Like Repulsion had a punk side to the execution, not so much to the lyrics. The lyrical content is more what you would associate with death metal, which is gore and horror stories and that kind of stuff. But in England, especially, the grindcore movement with bands like Napalm Death, Carcass, and then all the other bands that were surrounding like the early Earache days, was very politically opinionated and very much had lyrics that, wanted to bring a message. Like Carcass was notably vegetarian, vegan, and the reason they did those really, kind of ugly, nasty early record covers was kind of to shove that in people's faces, like this is what you eat,
I didn't know that.
And and early Napalm Death is very, Napalm Death is still obviously a political band because Barney is a very opinionated guy and doesn't hesitate to speak his mind at any concert or any interview, but they always had that element, which obviously came from punk. So I think they kind of took punk and just started playing faster and faster and shorter songs. And, so grindcore to me is like a lot of blast beats, usually pretty short songs, opinions, and just a general attitude that kind of feels like, yeah, this is grindcore. And then, of course, there's like different variants and, gore grind and whatnot, and all kinds of different things that pop up over time with weird names. And, but I think at the end of the day, those things really come down to what it means to you as a person in a specific time. And for me, it was just a revolutionary thing that, by the way, I didn't understand at first at all whatsoever. I heard that stuff on tapes that people would copy to me and be intrigued by it, but not really get it. And then I remember buying Scum, which is Napalm's first album. I had a sticker on it at the time that said "World's Fastest Band," so I was super into fast drumming and stuff. So I was like, I need to have this, right? So I bought it, and I remember bringing it home and putting it on my turntable and being like, "What is this bunch of noise?" And I remember telling my dad, like, "Is there a way you can return records to the store and like exchange them?" Like I didn't get it at all at first. He's like, "Nah, I think you're stuck with that one." So I, to my credit at the time, and this is before, obviously, Spotify, etc. Now it's easy to just be like, I don't like this next, But at the time, you kind of like, oh, I spent $10 on this. I gotta give this a chance. I got it. So the next day, I put it on again, and the next day again. And now, of course, it's one of my favorite albums of all time. But it really needed to sink in and kind of, my brain needed to kind of come to terms with the ruckus that I was having.
That's cool. Yeah, because it's the kind of thing that I guess I've never actively put it on myself to listen to. I guess I've heard it in passing, maybe seen the odd band at a festival, not really understood what's going on. So maybe I need to give it a chance, especially from a technical musician perspective, which I do always really appreciate the skill involved. Because I'm a rock drummer. I do a bit of double kick, triple H here and there. I'm not a technical drummer. I try and flag a little bit of very basic jazz and stuff. But when it comes to like the extreme, really fast stuff, I've never got to that level. Although I do want to, speed up the feet at least, and maybe get to the point where I can kind of do a blast beat for a decent amount of time. And like I know you're very good at that kind of style, but it's just because I've never played that style of music. It's never forced myself out of my comfort zone to kind of learn it. But it's one thing I've wanted to do, especially since starting this podcast last year, and I'm speaking to more metal drummers, and I guess I'm playing bigger stages, and it makes me think, oh man, I suck compared to that guy. So I don't know. That's the way I feel. But no, that's cool. That's great. So so from a drumming perspective, would you say you were more influenced by those kind of drummers, or was there any people in particular that you really respected and admired when you started playing?
Yeah, it was that, but it was always diverse. It wasn't just one thing. I mean, of course, I had my teenage phase where it needed to be like fast and extreme, or else, I didn't even care, and that phase did happen. But at the same time, like I said, I grew up, with stuff like what was on the radio, Prince, Madonna, you name it, whatever was big in the early 80s when I was a kid. And so I always retained my love for that, even though maybe during those years I wouldn't have admitted it so much to my friends. Like, it was always there. And I remember when my dad did get me a secondhand little drum kit, which was my first one, a Max Stone, I remember it was, and it didn't have any resonant heads. It was one of those old school kits, yeah. And I remember I was playing, I was trying to play along to Obituary and Suffocation and whatnot, Napalm Death and all that stuff, Morbid Angel. But at the same time, I was also trying to play like Red Hot Chili Pepper songs or Primus, or my dad would tell me, "Hey, check out this jazz record." Dave Brubeck, Take Five, like you played me that song, which is notoriously in 5/4, right?
Yeah.
I didn't really probably know what that was, but I tried to play along to it. Like I would just put everything in the headphones, put it on tape or whatever, put it in the headphones and just try to follow along. So I think I'm very thankful that there were so many different things that were welcomed in my family. My parents were both huge classical music fans, so there was a lot of that always on to it. And I think it just gave me a broader perspective before I knew that was important. You know what I mean? So it wasn't a conscious decision to be like, oh, I should do a lot of different things. It just kind of happened. And I think it was hugely beneficial after, when it came to actually do this for real. I realized that I had more going for me than just aping one specific drummer or one specific band. And even though people like Dave Lombardo are always like what motivated me to keep going, because I just really love his flow and his style and the ideas he came up with, that just sounded uniquely like him. At the time, I also didn't realize that I needed to do that myself, because I wasn't even thinking I would ever do drumming for real. When you're a kid, you're like, you don't think in those terms. You're just like, school's done. I want to go upstairs and play some drums. That's as far as the thinking went for me, right?
Yeah, man. So pretty similar for me. I just used to come home from school, and I guess at that age I was more into my like punk rock, pop punk stuff, and I was just playing along to Travis Barker songs and stuff. But that really helped me. And then I remember, it was all rock in the rock world, but I did, I was into some of the metal stuff, but it was the more mainstream stuff, like I mentioned before. Obviously, with my dad's band, I used to listen to that since I was a little kid. So the Motorhead stuff was a big influence on me, and
of course,
and stuff like that, which is just cool to have. But I agree with you. Mean listening to a wide style of music, and in general, it just helps your brain appreciate things, and it probably makes you a better musician overall when it becomes to being creative, I suppose. Cause
I tend to agree with that. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, because there are people who just do one thing and do it really well, and that's all they need, and for some people that works out. So it's not like a rule to success or something like that.
No.
But I just like the fact that I like music. For me, it doesn't have to be fitted in a category. The categories are there to kind of, I guess, be able to explain to people what something is. But beyond that, I view every band as a band, and
Yeah.
like if I go listen to your music, I'm not gonna have any preconceived notion about like, oh, it should fit into this box. I'm just gonna listen to it and be like, oh, what does it make me feel? And I still have that approach to this day, and I think that's the way it should be. Be open to it before you make a decision about it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's the way to be. That's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about your, I guess, career before Megadeth. For people who don't know, I guess from I guess your professional career. Let's talk about that and what you did, if you don't mind explaining the little journey.
Sure. Yeah, sure thing. So, well, I guess it started after I finished high school in Paris. My parents, my dad was a scientific researcher, and so I had kind of leaned towards that when it comes to what I'm going to do. But as much as I enjoyed some of those subjects, I still do. I'm still kind of into science and reading about it. So I also just was really so much into music that at one point my parents asked me, "What do you really want to do?" I said, "Well, I kind of want to do music." So they found me a music school in a city called Nancy, which is northeast of France, kind of close to the German border there. And so I went there, did 18 months of studying music in it's basically like an MI type school, like a modern based school where you spend a lot of time playing drums in different styles, jamming with people, learning songs. Not like the old school conservatory approach, but something more anchored in the music you and I grew up listening to. And of course, there started my first band, which is called Scarve, which we ended up doing a bunch of albums with and some tours. And I also just started playing with a bunch of different people. So the years following that, my journey through that school were very formative for me. First tours, first kind of experience working with different bands. And in Scarve, I was kind of my own, I was kind of like the band leader in a way. Whereas in other bands, I have to like figure out like, oh, sometimes it's not all about what I want, So that was that was a rough journey at times because I kind of knew what I wanted already. But I learned a lot from all of those different experiences, which eventually leads us to, or led me to in 2004. I got a call from Soilwork from Sweden that they needed a drummer to fill in for them on a tour, and at that point, I had done session work, like studio recordings for people in various circumstances, but I hadn't really done like a tour with a major band, and filling in kind of on short notice. So that was kind of exciting. And
Yeah.
I went with them, did the tour, and then after that came another tour. And then like, hey, do you want to play on the next album? And at that time, Scarve, my own band, was doing quite well. We had actually just started to kind of, with our third album, Irradiance, have good responses also outside of France, and started playing some bigger shows, big festivals, etc. So it was tricky to kind of be like, what am I doing? Am I sticking with my own thing or going with this thing that's obviously a lot more established than where there's actually a salary to be made? Because I was realizing with Soilwork, wow, we can actually go on tour and come home and have money to pay the bills. Wow, what's this? This was a new concept for me.
Yeah, I think that's the dream for any musician is, if I can pay my bills by only playing music, even if it's, even if it's just about enough, I think that's like the minimum ultimate goal for anyone who wants to be a musician. So yeah, I can imagine you were like, yeah, this is amazing. It's only recently I've been able to do that, pre-COVID, but it took me a long time to get there.
Yeah, exactly. It's an eye-opening thing when that starts happening because again, I think I was, as much as we were pursuing something like that with Scarve, we were so far from it that it kind of never really occurred to me that it was a true possibility, because you don't foresee somebody calling you and be like, hey, you want to come play with us? It just kind of happened, right? So I was like, whoa, okay, this is cool. This is something new. And we got along great with the Soilwork guys and they wanted me in the band. So eventually the following year I joined, it became official. And then from there on, I guess that was the start truly of my, professional journey as a musician. where I was now able to pay the bills with it and to really focus on it. And I had never toured like that because Soilwork was touring heavily at the time, all across the world. So I went to a bunch of places I'd never been to before.
Nice.
Very exciting time.
Yeah, man. So how long were you in Soilwork for then, altogether?
All together, let's see. So I started in early 2004, and then in 2016 was when I got the call from Megadeth, and I started playing with Megadeth in May of 2016. So yeah, it's over 12 years.
Wow. Wow.
Did a bunch of records, a live Blu-ray / DVD. I mean, it was a great time. I really learned a lot on so many levels. I have been to the U.S. As a kid, but because my dad briefly did an exchange program and worked there, so I'd always loved America. But I met my then-to-be wife here in the States on tour with Soilwork, and then subsequently moved to where I am now here in LA. So that was an impactful result of playing with Soilwork as well.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. Oh, that's such a cool story, and yeah, it just shows that you grind a little bit at the start and learn your craft, and then someone hopefully, might pick up on it. So how did Soilwork discover you to initially ask you to play then? Did they see you live or hear something that you played on, or?
So the way I understand or remember it happened is that it was the label boss at the time, a good friend of mine named Lauren Burl. He runs a label in France called Listenable Records. They released Soilwork's first couple albums before Soilwork moved on to Dirk Blast. And Listenable was also Scar's label. And so Lauren would still send his records to his bands, even that weren't on the label anymore, and keep in touch with their music breakout like that. And I guess they heard the Scarf album I mentioned earlier, Radiant, which is, I think, probably our most, in some way, our most accomplished album that had best production and stuff. And I guess they just heard the drumming and thought like, man, this guy, like, we want to have this guy in the band. That's kind of how it happened. So they asked Lauren, and then Lauren told me, hey, Peter Richards from Soilwork wants to talk to you. Is it cool if I put you in touch with him? Like, sure. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Like, oh, cool. I like Soilwork. I wonder what he's going to say, It was like, hey, you want to tour with us? So it was this crazy thing. But here's something I will say, though, which, I bet some of the listeners are musicians and or aspiring musicians. And one of the things that I really take away from what I went through in those times and kind of the journey and, like you said, the grinding part is that the fact that I was a very driven person who always put the bar very high for themselves and subsequently for my band, in the end really made a difference. If you had told me that one day I would be like a metal session drummer, back then I would be like, that doesn't even exist. There's no way. I mean, sure, you had a few guys that, like Gene Hoglan and a few other people that were obviously, so talented that they would play with various people and still do to this day, rightfully so. But for me, I never, as a little dude from Belgium living in France, a very non-metal country,
Yeah.
I never thought that I would be like a session drummer in LA, like who can barely fit in all the recordings that get thrown at him, So yeah, here I am today. And I think it was a lot because with Starve, I really wanted us to sound as good as the bands I was into, which was Morbid Angel, Strapping Young Lad, Fear Factory, like bands that had really high level of playing and production. And so we pushed really hard to get that stuff. We went to Sweden to record our albums with Daniel Bergstrand, one of the best producers on the planet, great friend of mine. And it took a while, the first couple albums weren't, everything we hoped them to be and stuff. But eventually with Irradiant, we hit a thing where we could see that the response all of a sudden started changing and started reverberating outside of our country. And, because the production was good, the songs were good, the playing was good. And that's kind of what we had always aimed for in a way. And I had always aimed for as a drummer as well. So I spent a lot of hours working really hard at getting better. In the end, of course, like I'm good friends with the Gojira guys, right? To make a parallel with another French band. We kind of came up at the same time, played together a few times, before either band had done much of anything. And they're great. I mean, they're so amazing. I saw them a couple of weeks ago at Knotfest where we played.
Nice.
they're always just amazing, and I'm so proud every time I see them because I feel like they kind of achieved what I was trying to achieve with Scar, which is like a band of friends, just pushing their own music and making it international. And those guys always had it. They had the magic. I remember from the early shows, they already have this stage presence where you could just tell like there's something special here.
Oh,
This
man.
should be known in the world. I felt that way about this. So with us, we didn't, I didn't go that way for Scar, but I ended up being lucky in the sense that I ended up, getting my own sort of career out of it because I pushed so hard for what those guys pushed for as well. So sometimes you don't know the path it's going to take. Is basically the message I was going to give people. But if you keep pushing and you really just, put the bar as high as you can for yourself, there's a good chance that, a good result will come out of it.
That's great advice, and it's making me feel pretty crappy, to be honest, because I know I'm a little bit like always been. Well, no, I don't know. I talk about this a lot. I've always been actively playing and actively gigging and writing songs with bands, but when it comes to actually improving my drumming, I'm probably not spending enough time on that. And I feel like I'm 34 now.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's still time, but I've probably spent the last 15 years not improving as much as I could have on the instrument itself. And now, like I mentioned earlier on, doing this podcast, I've been doing this for just over a year now, or a year and a half maybe. It's really inspired me now to kind of knuckle down and at least improve a little bit, get a few extra points and learn some new skills I never could do before and stuff like that. So yeah, I take your advice on massively, and you're a great example of just working hard really, and it paying off, and you getting a break, and now you've obviously got another even bigger break, being recruited to play with Megadeth, which they are one of the biggest metal bands around. So similarly, I'm assuming they were aware of your work, or maybe someone said, "Oh, check out this guy," and then you've got the call. How did that work? How did that come about?
Yeah, I think so. It's crazy. I mean, I was on tour with Soilwork, and I got a call that Dave Mustaine wanted to talk to me. So I imagine that's like that's like the weirdest, shockingly strange call. Where it's like, who? I'm sorry,
Yeah, man.
Like Dave Mustaine. I mean, it's crazy, but yeah, I think again the same thing that we talked about kind of translated there, where I'm not actually as active as I would like to be online with drum videos and all that, but I did post some here and there, and Soilwork and recording with Devin Townsend and things like that, just stuff where I kind of felt like, oh, this should probably be a moment where I should put a camera up and do something with it, because I usually just like to enjoy the moment, and once you start messing with cameras and stuff, for me it's like this headache, and
No,
like, I'm not. You know what I mean?
I totally agree, because you just want to be focusing on playing and warming up and making sure your gear is right, rather than setting up cameras and checking they're charged up before or play. I know what you mean. I've done a little bit of filming my shows, and it just is, you're thinking about something else you shouldn't be thinking of, and even like where the camera is, how are you looking on the camera? And I'm like, I don't want to be thinking about it. I'd rather just be focused on playing. So I know what you mean, yeah. But yeah, you do have some great stuff on YouTube for anyone who does want to check it out. I had a little browse earlier on, and lots of other great interviews as well. So I'm trying not to repeat everything too much, but there's a few other great interviews on there that I've seen, and scroll through, and some great drum demonstration videos, which I'll bring up in a minute. I want to talk about the Dirk Blast.
Cool, yeah, I'll talk about that, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, yeah, you know what I mean. So it's basically, one of those things where with Megadeth, I guess different people in the camp had, somehow known me. Like, for instance, the drum tech at the time, who was also my drum tech for the first years in the band, Tony Loriano, amazing drummer. Turns out I had toured with him with Scar back in 2002. We did a tour opening for Nylon in Europe, which was like our first big European tour with Scars, and we were like the opening band. And Tony at the time was just, I don't know if you've heard his work with now, but he did one album with the band on drums, but his work was just absolutely, you know, at the time, some of the most extreme drumming you could imagine, you know, hyper fast and technical. He had like these, I remember as a drummer like this, he had saw blades on his kit that he used kind of for effects. So like, you know, like these high pitch. So the story around that was funny. Like I would talk to him and his drum pick and like joke about how he'd go into hardware stores and be like, you know, with a drumstick, like checking this out of different songs, which is just brilliant, right?
Yeah. That's so inventive and creative as well. To try
yeah, exactly.
Like
But so I knew Tony. You know, we had stayed in touch over the years. We became friends on that tour, and a lot of mutual respect for each other as drummers. And so he knew me, so he kind of vouched for me. I had met Kiko. Then, you know, freshly Megadeth's new guitar player, I met him some years prior because he had come to a Soilwork show in Finland and we had talked and stuff. And so there were different people, you know, various people who kind of, you know, put together a list of potential candidates when Dave had asked them to do so. And cause that's how Dave usually, I think, takes care of situations like that. He doesn't just go like, find me a guy. He just kind of asks everybody, who do you suggest? And it turns out I was on different people's lists, and I guess then they looked at some videos and concluded that I could probably play the stuff. So that's how that happened, you know. So again, in a way, like I said, what I was saying earlier, the work you put in, you know, it can pay off in unexpected ways, but it will probably pay off if you're, you know, of course for Megadeth there's a bunch of criteria where I happen to fit in, you know.
Yeah.
And so for someone else, it might be something different. And it's also not, I want to say this too, it's also not my path is the only path. You know, there's, like I said earlier, there's many different paths. You don't need to be a technical drummer. You don't need to be this or that. Like some people do one band, like look at Gojira, you know, like I don't know if Mario ever played with another band in his life. He might have, I don't know, but you know, he did his thing and look how well it's going. So for some people that works, and you know, so there's not obviously one route to follow. I think the most important thing, which Kiko and I have talked about and agree on, is really the passion.
Yeah,
you know what you feel inside. I'm sure, Dane, you can relate to this since you're obviously, you know, I have no doubt as passionate as I am. It has to be something that you just can't, you know, you can't imagine your life without your drum kit, and you can't imagine your life without music and somehow being a, you know, part of a creative entity, you know. And I think if you really feel that one way or the other, it'll get you somewhere.
That's great, man. Yeah, and yeah, you're right. And I don't know what else I would do if I couldn't play drums. You know, right. Like now I'm talking about them all the time doing this podcast. It's kind of like, yeah. And I think a lot of people, it's the same for a lot of people. I think there's lots of people I've known and they were into it as a kid and then they kind of grew into an adult or maybe had a kid or something. And now they don't play anymore at all. And they just got some other job or whatever. And a lot, you know, I think a lot of that comes from the pressure of earning money from music is not easy. And you do need that break. You can have as much talent and still not get the break. Unfortunately, you have more chance of getting a break if you've got the talent and the work ethic. But unfortunately, I've seen a lot of talented guys come and go, and now I don't even know if they pick up an instrument, which is a shame. But yeah, you know, you've got to at least have the passion and the work ethic, and yeah, you're a prime example of that. And yeah, so you've been touring with Megadeth for a few years now. I imagine you've played so many shows. I saw you play once in Cardiff, and that was a good one. That was a really good one. Obviously, we were on the Mega Cruise together.
Yes.
And at the time, I was kind of like, I guess, concentrating on what we were playing. I was aware of some of the lineup, and obviously you guys couldn't play because of Dave's illness. And it wasn't until later I discovered that you did a drum clinic on the boat, and I didn't know anything about it until after you've done it. So I'm absolutely gutted that I missed that because I am sure I would have absolutely loved it. So I apologize for not being there. I wasn't really. I guess maybe the guys who had bought tickets were more familiar with the lineup. They probably get given the programs and stuff. But I guess we were just in a band. I was more concerned with getting over the border and
Right.
and the customs and stuff. And I guess we got on, and I guess I wasn't really concerned with what else was going on as much anyway. But yeah, have you done many? I know you've done drum festivals and things like that. So have you done lots of drum clinics, like in drum stores and stuff like that as well? Was that a
Yeah.
unique event?
No, I've done a bunch. It seems nowadays they're a bit less prevalent in a lot of countries because I just think that, I mean, what I've been told is that with YouTube and everything just being so readily available, there's just less, unfortunately, less demand for people to go and watch a drummer play in a music school
Yeah.
or a music store or whatever. It's just kind of unfortunate because I think being there live is very inspiring. But yeah, I did a lot of clinics in the late 2010s, late 2000s, early 2010s. There was this period between maybe 2008 and 2013, 14 where I did a lot of that. I notably did 2 tours in China, which I'd never been to China. So the first time I went there, I did 2 full drum clinic tours across the country for 2-3 weeks. It was pretty insane.
I bet that was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really amazing and kind of very culture shock in some ways, but in a good way. I really enjoyed that. Great memories from those tours. And yeah, a lot in Europe. Here in the U.S., there's not so much of that, so I've only done a handful. It's interesting because tell me how you feel about this. As a drummer, you're kind of used to being, there's the band to kind of shield you from the people, right?
Yeah, I like the fact that I'm in the back. I do like
Yeah.
that. I always used to shy away from interviews and things like that. I just used to kind of get up on stage, do my thing. I didn't mind. I've always quite liked saying hello to fans and things like that because I think it's really special to have fans in the first place. The fact that there are fans is amazing. Yeah. So I think it's nice to give back to them. But in terms of public and press, I didn't like it. I never liked having a microphone, to speak into. So I don't do any backing vocals and stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of like being in the back. So yeah, you're about to ask, how would I feel giving a drum clinic? It's not something I would really like to do, but I think maybe I'd have more confidence now because I speak on this often, and now there's loads of footage of me talking on the internet. So I guess maybe this has definitely boosted my confidence with regards to speaking. I don't know if that's the same as publicly speaking. I don't know if it's the same thing, but I got a fairly strange accent being from Wales and stuff like that. I've never felt that confident about it, but yeah, now I'm like, who cares? This is me. This is who I am. This is what my accent is. This is what my voice sounds like. Whatever. It is what it is. But yeah, so I imagine. I think when I was younger, I was always a little bit more introverted. I think a lot of musicians are. Maybe not so much lead singers.
Yeah, probably not. I was like,
yeah, they tend to like the attention, and maybe some lead guitarists. But I think drummers and bass players always tend to be a bit more introverted.
Yep.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
That's how I was, right? Yeah, and so the whole concept of a drum clinic was terribly frightening to me at first. So at first, when I got offers to do them through, my brands, Lionel Evans, they would reach out to me and be like, "Hey, you want to play here and this and that?" I'd be like, "No, I'm busy. I have a tour or something." I was always happy when it coincided with the date and I couldn't make it because that meant I don't have to do the drum clinic. But eventually, my luck ran out and I started having offers sometimes when I didn't have anything going on that I could use as an excuse. So
yeah,
so it was definitely like I said, I was introverted as you growing up and not a person who's used to taking a mic and speaking to people. So my first 2 drum clinics were probably pretty crappy in that regard. But then I realized that what what people really enjoy is just somebody going up there and kind of conversing with them. Of course, there's the drumming part, which people go there to see, or whatever instrument it is that you're gonna watch a clinic of. But that part, I'm kind of like, okay, this is what I do, so I know how to play drums. This is fine. That's the other part. It's like, how do I kind of put that into a context and have a beautiful story to tell around it, or a useful story, or whatever. And then I realized that if you talk about things that are true about your own experience, and then kind of ask people questions, or have people ask you questions, very quickly you get to the point where the organizers of the event are like, it's been 2 hours, we should probably wrap this up. Like it happens very quickly. Wow. Where you're like, wow, we've been talking for a while, and then I would have people afterwards tell me, this was so great, like this was such a cool conversation, and I learned so much from this, and or relate to things I said, and so I was like, wow, this is actually much more than just showing off drums, or talking about paradiddles or whatever, because that stuff people can, like I said earlier, you can go on YouTube and do all that stuff on your own pretty much.
Yeah.
Not that I recommend against studying your instrument and having a good teacher, because I do think that's extremely valuable. But yeah, it was really the human element, if you know what I mean. And so once I started leaning into that, which was a bit trickier, like in a place like China where you have to go to a translator and stuff, it's a bit less immediate,
Yeah.
But still, I tried my best to just always lean into that, and to just kind of be myself and share my whatever I've learned, throughout the years doing this. People really seem to love it, and it became a very kind of heartwarming experience for me as well. To see that it touched people, and that it inspired other musicians, or even people who sometimes come to clinics who are not musicians themselves, but who learn something from the life approach. At the end of the day, everybody's looking for, the basic questions in life, right? Even probably people listening to your podcast are doing that. I'm sure there's a number of drummers and musicians, but there might also be people who are just trying to figure out where they fit in, how things, fall in place, because, life is kind of a, this mysterious thing that you can never really fully get a grasp on. Sometimes you think you do, and then something happens, and then it turns out that you're all wrong. So I'm always kind of intrigued by that, and I like listening personally to people from different backgrounds and stuff, and how they, make things work for themselves, and find inspiration, and find joy in every day. Because I've had times in my life which I'm sure everybody can relate to, where I was bogged down by various things, and kind of didn't really enjoy my days. And truth be told, that can happen, and that's okay, but you can't let that take over, because life is too short to to let those things take over. So now we went on a really philosophical turn, but yeah.
No, I wanted to bring this up, to be honest, because just from the emails we've had back and forth, and I've seen a few interviews and listened to a few interviews with you. I was going to say your personality and the kind of, it seems like the mindset that you have is just really positive. And I really like that, and it's something I'm trying to improve in myself. Maybe I sound like the happiest guy ever doing this podcast, but people who know me, my family members and my wife probably know, I'm not always the happy chappy that I appear to be, and I've got quite a lot of history of, I'd say, pessimistic, and just being a bit negative about things, and grumpy, and nothing unusual, but the last few years, I guess I've been inspired by a lot of podcasts that I listen to. I don't just listen to music ones, and I'm trying to do a lot of things in my daily life to to give out more positive vibes, be a happier person, write a gratuitous diary and all this stuff that they say you should do to brighten up your day. And and it was only this afternoon I came across, there was I think it's like a 20-minute interview with you and the guitarist Kiko, and he's kind of talking to you about that, and I was like, makes complete sense. And that's a really good one for anyone who wants to kind of delve into that a lot deeper. But if for anyone else who's listening then, and maybe thinks I want to be a happier person in general, do you have any tips for what they can maybe do to kind of achieve that next level or beyond?
Yeah, let's see. Well, I mean, happiness is kind of a complex thing to define, and I think the first step would be to kind of figure out what makes you happy. Some people have that figured out. Like I think a lot of people like you and I, when you're in touch with the passion in your life,
Yeah.
that's already a big step.
Yes.
I'm sure you feel the same as me and every musician listening here. Once you grab your instrument and you go to that world, your worries kind of tend to dissipate most of the time.
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful thing. So if you don't have any true passion, try to find one. For some people, it might be tricky to do that because we're not all so lucky to have supportive parents or parents who are kind of guiding us to, hey, here's some passions you could look into. And my parents were extremely encouraging and supportive, and without them I probably wouldn't be here doing this. So I owe a lot to them for that, and to this positivity that's part of my life. I think they instilled that in me very much. But this, then again, when it comes to your question, another thing is really to kind of, I mean, this is going to sound super hippy dippy and cliche, but the truth is, like, we forget that life is a gift every day. We really do, because we get so focused on the things that we need to do every day, and it becomes this, hamster wheel kind of thing. That we just kind of forget that, like, look, like, one day this is not going to be like this. We might not be here doing this. And for me personally, like, I've always kind of tried to, go in that direction and have people around me, like including my wife, who's very wise on all those things, to kind of steer me in the right direction. Because, between parentheses, truth be told, I'm like you. I can be really, I can seem like this super happy guy, but I can be really grumpy and pessimistic and negative, and especially in the past. When I was a bit younger, I used to go to negative spaces. That was kind of my comfort zone for me, hence like the whole, like, extreme metal, like, dark lyrical subjects, like, all that stuff kind of made me feel good in a weird way. So, because it kind of was a way for me to express all the not so positive feelings I had and kind of find a place for them. So,
okay.
Anyway, parenthesis closed. It's really important to kind of be aware of the fragility of this all, and not in a dramatic sense of like, oh my God, I better do this and that because I might die tomorrow. Not like that, but just kind of keep it in the back of your mind that, like, we got it pretty good, regardless of our individual, things that aren't so great, because we all have some stuff probably that would be like, I'd love to change this, or I'd love to, blah, blah, blah. For some people, would be like, I'd love to have a job I actually enjoy it. For other people, it could be like, I wish I lived in a country where it was like in that country, etc. So, obviously the levels are always uneven, but still, just to be alive and to be healthy and to have to have your days where you can do things that you want to do, I mean, that should be appreciated. And what I was going to say is, for me, that really sprang into reality when my mom got ill and passed away, which I talked about in that interview too with Kiko. I remember that was part of the story I told. And obviously, as anyone can imagine, or anybody who's been through this, which most people probably have, when you lose somebody close to you, it's life altering, and it's it really sets you to think. My mom was an extremely optimistic person, and the way she dealt with being ill and eventually, passing away was just so inspiring to me, and I admire her so much for keeping her spirits the way she did throughout what was the most difficult time of her life. And that really just showed me that, like, wow, man, if my mom can be this way when she's basically, reached the end of the journey and just sees everything just gradually getting worse, because that's truly what it was. Like, I can't do this anymore, I can't do that anymore, now I can't do this simple thing anymore, and it's not going to come back. If she can do that and stay optimistic through that and smile and be happy, like, what am I complaining about? Like, what do I have that's worth even bitching about for even a half a second any given day? That was kind of like my eyes open, and I was like, I gotta stop feeling sorry for myself, because I realized that I really felt sorry for myself way too often, and let that define my days, and let that allow me to wake up in the morning and already be grumpy or just at this guy, this situation, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that it's all about how I react to things. It's not about if stuff's gonna happen, because it will. My wife has always said this to me, and she's always kind of held this wisdom. Look, stuff's gonna go wrong. Like, no matter how hard you try, you're gonna have stuff where all of a sudden it just goes completely sideways, and now you have to deal with the situation. So it's about how you deal with it. It's not about trying to prevent stuff from going sideways. I mean, sure, if you can, you do that, but sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
So that became a new philosophy for me.
That's amazing, man. And thanks for sharing the story as well. And obviously, really sorry that happened, and you had to go through that. But it's changed your outlook on the rest of your life, and I think that is a good lesson to take. So yeah, thanks, man. Yeah. Hopefully, some of the listeners can kind of take something from that as well, and change their life a little bit.
Run for the Song podcast.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Drum for the Song. I just wanted to briefly interrupt the interview to tell you about my Patreon page, which is a place where you can support the podcast and, of course, support myself. You can sign up to one of the 3 tiers on there. There's one that's £3 a month, one that is £5 a month, and one that is £10 a month. There are loads and loads of exclusive benefits to signing up, including bonus episodes, merch discounts, Christmas card for myself. If you sign up to the top tier, I'll send you a pair of my drumsticks. Loads of other stuff, so go check it out. It's patreon.com/drum for the song. And another way you could support me if you're interested, if you're not bothered about the Patreon thing, if you go to my official website, drumforthesong.com, you can send a donation via PayPal. So yeah, thanks for watching this and enjoy the rest of the show.
Run for the Song podcast.
Let's go back to the kind of drum nerdy talk then. You've mentioned some of the brands you've used. What drums are you using at the moment? And let's talk about some gear that you use, please.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. I actually started with Tama a long time ago. They had kind of the contract with the school I went to. So this was back in late '93 to early '95. All the kids in the school that we got as students were Tama kids. And one of the teachers there was also the rep for Tama in France at the time. So when I came out of the school and actually soon after became a teacher myself there, because they had a spot that they didn't really have anyone for metal, so I just kind of up and volunteered, even though I'd never really taught drums. So that was another baptism by fire.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah,
I just kind of threw myself into it, like, oh, this could be a job. I did that for a long time. Anyways, this teacher of mine who was also the Tama rep, he had kind of, I'd become his protege kind of early on. He kind of saw something in me, which now looking back, I'm like, wow, he really had a keen eye, just I would have had no idea, like, why me, like I wasn't that great at the time at all. But anyway, he saw something in me and quickly got me hooked up with, some beginner Tama endorsements, which was like, oh, you can get a double pedal for 50% off,
Yeah.
Like that's the first kind of steps, right? Before you do anything. And I wasn't even playing really any shows at the time, like maybe some small local gigs. There wasn't much to gain from Tama, but it was just really, trying to get me started. And
it's great that he believed in you enough to kind of hook you up in that way at that time. Because normally, if anyone approached a brand, especially a big brand like Tama, and they're only playing local shows, you'd be lucky to get a reply at all. So that's great. He definitely saw something in you then.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm super grateful that he did that, because that really got me started. And then down the line, so Tama happened in '95 and gradually evolved, to become a real full endorsement as I was doing more things. And then once Soilwork got the Auspice tour in the States, at the time we had, I know Auspice has done a bunch of one-off gigs in more recent years, but at the time it was this full touring package where, we'd go out for 2 months in the summer and just hit the entire country with this amazing 2-stage crazy festival, which was an amazing experience for me at the time. One of my favorite memories of touring ever.
I bet. Yeah.
So, but when we did that with Soilwork, which was in the summer of 05, I happened to do a drum clinic in France, one of my very first drum clinics at the time, and Thomas Lang was playing there. It was a Meinl endorsee, and so the Meinl CEO was there as well with him, kind of doing the clinic with him and being his guy there. And so I went and talked with him because they had done a call for searching for artists earlier, and I had sent in some information about me. So I went and asked him, hey, did you receive my, the thing I submitted? And he's like, well, if you haven't heard back, maybe you still have to look at it. I'm not sure, and stuff like that. Anyway, so we got to talking, and I was like, okay, obviously they haven't looked at my thing. But so I told him, like, what we had coming up. My band Soilwork's doing the Auspice tour in 2005. He goes, in this upcoming summer, we're going to the States in the Auspice. He's like, okay. What's your give me your email again? Send me an email when you get home. So I did, like, after the clinic next Monday or whatever. I go home, send me an email, and next thing I know, all of a sudden here's a Meinl endorsement. Because what people need to understand about endorsements is that these brands, they're not just going to give anybody stuff. It needs to be useful for them, obviously. And so once you start doing like big level things, it becomes very, the visibility becomes very useful for them. And Meinl are a great brand. They've treated me super kindly, just like Tom over the years. I've been extremely supportive. So, those were kind of the two big, the big endorsers that I have that really made a difference. I also worked with Evans. I'm not going to go on about this for too much. It'll probably be boring. But Evans drum heads, tune track software, which is great. Roland E-drums, which very great to be working with them as well. Which happened thanks to Megadeth, and obviously that visibility and platform I have now. And at the end of the day, it's great because these brands allow me to do my job without having too much financial burden attached to it, and at the same time to really kind of help others too. Like, I teach a lot, both on my acoustic kit and on my electronic kit, because I do a lot of lessons through Skype, out of country or out of state. And so I can't tell you the amount of people over the years that I've introduced to new brands or new, even the concept of using, electronic kit, which, rewind 10, 15 years was still kind of a primitive, archaic concept that wasn't so, so usable, especially for people playing extreme stuff. Yeah. Now it's come to a level where I do a lot of my recordings with the Roland kit and with tune track sounds, and people can't even tell the difference. Even drummers can't even know. Like, I'll have drummers and producers be like, did you record that on your Tama kit? I'm like, no, I recorded that at home using my Roland. They're like, I would not have known if you hadn't told me. That's how good the sounds are now. And like, tune track, the superior drummer software is absolutely stellar. So couple that with Roland's amazing hardware. It's one of the reasons that I'm here today, that I've been able to work in between tours and pay my bills, is thanks to stuff like that existing, and so the gear does at some point become really instrumental in, in this industry. We're not, as you know, and we're not in a time anymore where bands sell millions of records and you get these ridiculous recording advances like, bands like Megadeth and stuff did in the 80s, where they got their recording advance, went and recorded a super expensive album for 2 months, and then still had enough money to live for a year. Like, that's done. Like, that time is over with. In the era of Spotify and Apple Music, etc. Like, that money isn't there anymore, except for a few select, like, the biggest selling artists in the world, maybe the Adeles and the Beyoncés, but that's about it, For other bands, even bands like us, it's like you got a lot less, money to stretch over time. So you got to be out on tour. You got to be doing more stuff. You got to basically be your own CEO, as I tell people often. Yeah. And run your own company, whether you're a drummer or guitar player, just kind of run your own show and find ways in which you can work, because that's really vital if you want to do this for a living nowadays.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I say if you're a musician today, you just got to know how to hustle, basically. And
Yeah,
find other ways to bring in income. And yeah, I've dabbled with teaching in the past with like young kids I used to teach, and I kind of took a big break from it. But it's something I'm talking about maybe doing again via some form of electronic drum connection. So I was actually I heard that you use the electronic drums for recordings as well on one of the other podcasts you did. Extreme Metal podcast. That was good. So anyone who was into that, I've only listened to the episode you were on, but if you're into that kind of music, that seemed like a cool podcast. And the host, I forget his name now. Sorry, but he drums in Carcass, right? Is that right?
oh, Dan Wilding.
Yes, that was it. Yeah. So again, like I said, it's not a world I'm that familiar with, but I listened to that episode a few weeks ago. Trying to do my research, and
Great job, yeah.
but that's another drum related podcast I recommend. I like sharing whenever I discover something new that I think my listeners will like, rather than hide it away. I'd rather them go check it out, So
Right. Yeah.
it's a really good one. But yeah, so it is amazing that these electronic drum sounds, and again, it's something I've not got into, but I've started to try and do it lately with not much success. I'm not very good with the technology side of things. So I've got I don't know if you're familiar with the brand Two Box. They're a Swedish
Yes.
electronic drum company. So I've got one of those kits. The old Drum It
Right.
5 is quite an old one now.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to hook that up via MIDI to my laptop with a USB, and I haven't tried the Tune Track stuff. To be honest, my brother recommended I should try the Steven Slate free version to start off with, just to kind of get it. But I'm still struggling with the mapping and all that. But it is impressive when I've seen people set it up properly. And like you said, I've even had people locally that have programmed their own drums using a keyboard for like their demos or whatever. And I'm like, I can kind of half tell, but it's quite impressive. But I imagine if you're an actual drummer doing it, it's going to obviously sound a lot more realistic. So yeah, it's amazing that you've done that. And it did. I think listening to that encouraged me to kind of I need to try and work out this stuff. I've got this kit that's been there. I've never hooked it up via MIDI ever. Like the internal sounds are great, but obviously if you're recording, you want to be mixing. You want to mix afterwards. It's obviously better to use a drum program as well, and it's just like a world that I've never really delved into, but I'm going to try. But no, impressive. And yeah, great to hear that Roland are now helping you out, and yeah, their hardware is incredible. And
Yes.
do you ever combine like some of the electronic pads in your acoustic setup, or do you normally do either or?
Yeah, I've never combined them. I've never really had a reason to, because I know some guys do like the sub bass hits, like the
Yeah.
so we'll have a pad for stuff like that, or to start intros and things like that. I've never really had a need for that. I've always tried to keep my acoustic drums acoustic. I get the question a lot if I use triggers, and I don't. I briefly did have them on my kit, when I first joined Megadeth, because they were used to having them, and so I kind of kept them. But we got rid of them quickly after our front of house engineer said I don't need them. I'm not using them because we play consistent. So I just there's no point in having them.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, off they go. Nothing against triggers, by the way. I think for some styles of music and for some, in some situations, they are the ideal solution. Yeah. I've always, tried to drum in a way where, with some EQing and compression, even the very fast kick parts could be heard sufficiently. I don't know if it was always successful, but that's usually the conversation I have, with a front of house engineer or with a studio producer engineer, whoever it is that's recording me, especially if there's going to be, Megadeth doesn't have like 240 BPM kicks, so there's nothing much to worry about. I think the stuff is like 190, 200, so I can easily keep that even. It's not so much of a problem. Once you start going into like 220, 230, 240, you're going to lose a little bit of volume, even if you have, with most techniques at least. I've seen guys actually do the heel toe like Nick starts from Unearth, is one of the guys that comes to mind who sat behind my kit once and started doing heel toe at some crazy tempo, and it was super loud. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, wow, that's crazy.
That's
I
impressive.
can't
Yeah.
do that. I'm not. Yeah, I don't do the heel toe thing really, but I
No.
tried it, but it just doesn't seem to work for me. But I do like swivel.
Okay.
And I can still keep a good consistency, up to a certain tempo, and so I just try to make it work, because I like the sound of an acoustic kit. I just do, and the kits I have, like I currently play the Star Classic Maple for the most part. It sounds so good, and the kicks and everything sounds so good. It's like it's kind of a shame to replace the sounds, even though nowadays you could technically like just sample the actual kick and then use that and trigger it so it still be around the sound. But I don't know, there's just, to me, maybe it's because I grew up in an era where, a lot of the stuff I used to listen to, their producers were still figuring out what this music even was, let alone how to produce it, like we were talking about you going back and discovering early napalm and repulsion and stuff. Like you're probably going to be like, this sounds like utter shit, and these people don't know how to play, because that's kind of like how it was back then. But to me, that's also ironically, or whatever you want to call it, that's part of the charm of that style of music is that, there's this era now or this vision where everything just needs to sound super perfect and everything's to a click. And I'm curious to hear your opinion about this, because to me, like, sure, in some situations that's great, and I get why people do it, and people get used to hearing this stuff of high quality, and it's cool. But I'm also very relieved to see that there are still bands, current day bands, that are, that understand that things like thrash metal and death metal and grindcore and black metal needs to be grimy and evil and not really clean. And even rock and roll, like to speak more to like some of that where you're in, it's like it's not all about like if it's too shiny and perfect, there's not that much rock and roll left about it, in my opinion. I mean, to a degree it works, but there needs to be some kind of live feeling and some kind of rawness and maybe kind of teetering off the edge at times that you don't get when you play everything to like, here's the tempo for the song, like here it is, like stick to the tempo. I mean, I do it all the time because I have to do it, but I try to stick to, I try to infuse it with as much humanity and kind of flow as I can, because to me, like when you go watch, say, the Stones, Charlie Parker, Charlie Watts, rest his soul, I saw him. Luckily, my wife and I got to see him a few times when Charlie was still alive, and still doing his magic. I mean, there's something about that you just can't, you can't change that. You can't replicate that. It's a natural interaction between people, and it might flow a little bit differently each night. So you have some unknowns that don't add up with, video walls and pre-programmed lights and whatnot. But to me, that's part of the beauty of this kind of music.
No, it's something I feel fairly strongly about. With, I guess, what you're talking about with the kind of extreme metal styles. I haven't heard enough of it to kind of form an opinion, but it would. I'd imagine, I wouldn't want it to be absolutely perfect and sparkly clean. So that's like a production thing, and I guess the click track thing. And I have heard that a lot of more old school metal bands are going back to recording albums without clicks now, and I think that's really cool. It's probably a producer's nightmare in terms of, I guess, cheating and copy and pasting things. I'm sure they don't like that, but from a listener's perspective, it brings a more human element, and I think they'll feel more from that music. And likewise with the kind of rock and roll and the music I play, we do record to click tracks, but it's not until we get to the studio that I guess we get to a song and we have to find a tempo for it, because we've written the songs organically in a room. Nice. You know what I mean? Not to a click. So it's quite often that we find what we think is the tempo on the click, and then we get to the chorus or something and we're like, oh, this feels too slow now, or this is too fast. And then we end up having to kind of change the click tempo to move to one section and then back. And I'm like, well, I'd rather, like, we have to do that, I think, to kind of find like a middle point. But live, I've never, with this band anyway, I've never played live with a click, and I just don't think it would work. And I think it would zap a lot of the energy out of
Right.
what my band is like anyway. I'm not speaking for all bands out there, but like you said, some bands do it now because the live show is quite often about visuals and like video screens and lights they have to be linked with click tracks and stuff. So, and I guess with the bigger productions and the higher ticket price, people are expecting more of a production, and there's I guess there isn't a way around that. And it was quite interesting because I spoke to, I'm sure you know Mickey D, who used to be the Motorhead drummer, who he now plays for the Scorpions, and we kind of talked about how different is the show now compared to playing with Motorhead, which was very physical, fairly fast, lots of power, and even though the Scorpions music is technically, I guess, softer and slower, and he said because it's all on click and because it has to link up with the videos and the lights, he doesn't really get the breaks he used to have. And he's obviously very capable of playing to the click and stuff like that. But he said I find it a lot more difficult to do that because if he needed a break in a Motorhead set, he just kind of signaled to Lemmy, "Oh, I'm just going to pretend to tune my snare drum and take a drink or whatever," and it allowed that. But whereas a lot of shows now are regimented, I guess someone's pressing play at some point and everyone's on click and in ears, and I think a lot of people even get cues now, as in, I don't know, I've never done it. So from what I've heard, everything's very rigid, and there's no room for any flexibility. But again, that's very hard to do as well. It's hard to pull off, and it's very demanding. As a performer and as a musician, so I respect everything. But from a personal point of view, from the style of music I play, I think the music needs a bit more kind of, it needs to keep that human element and breathe a lot more. And I think it helps with the excitement. But I guess metal is a bit different again. But whatever, it's interesting. Everyone has different opinions, and certain styles work with it more and stuff like that. And I think a lot of the more modern forms of rock can get away with it and maybe require it more because I don't know, I'm not really into as much of these kind of new rock bands, I guess the commercial side of rock, and because there's a lot of backing tracks going on, and I'm not sure what you think about that, but like I don't know, there's a lot of the guitar is less prominent and like less high in the mix, and it's kind of all about with this pad and synthy stuff going on, and like I don't know. But if all that's on a track, I guess it all has to be on click, and I don't know. It is what it is. But it's still challenging, and if for drummers out there, I think everyone should at least practice to a click. For people who are just starting out, perhaps, because I remember the first time I went to a recording studio, I think I was like 16 or 17, so I was quite young, and I played along to albums, but I'd never strictly played along to a click before, and I couldn't do it.
Right.
And it was quite embarrassing. I'm fine now, but it was a bit of a shock because I thought I could play fairly steady at my own pace in a band situation because that's all I'd ever done really is played with other humans and played along to CDs on my electric kit. But it's something everyone needs to do, and I know we've mentioned it a lot of time on the podcast, but try not to avoid the click when practicing. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely part of the bass arsenal these days.
Yeah, absolutely. We've kind of talked about that. What was I going to say? So let's talk about the Dirk Blast, because I'd heard about it. I'd heard, you've got the T-shirt or whatever you've got, and you mentioned it in interviews, but it wasn't until earlier on today, and I found you a video of demonstrating what it was, and I was like, whoa, that's like I said, I'm not that familiar with the music that uses the blast beats as much, but yours sounded incredibly musical, and it was just like the way you broke it all down, and I was like, no, that's really cool, and it made me kind of go, I'd like to kind of figure out how to do that one day, because it seemed like it would open up my drumming a lot more. So I know it's difficult to do it without a kit in front of you now, but for anyone who's interested or might want to check it out, how do you describe what the Dirk Blast is and how you came up with it?
Yes, it's basically it's a rudiment. It's based on a rudiment. So slam accent, I believe it is. And the way I came up with it is that one of my teachers is a guy named Frank Aguilon, French jazz drummer, amazing teacher. Had said to us, to me and my fellow students, that a good way to kind of integrate something that you're studying theoretically into your drumming is to just play it all over the kit for an amount of time. You know? Yeah. And he said sometimes it's just going to take you like 20 minutes of doing that, and you'll actually have integrated something that's just purely an exercise up to that point, or a sticking pattern or whatever, to have integrated that into your actual playing, because now you're experimenting across the kit. It kind of makes sense, but as a young drummer at the time, that was a neat concept to me, because I had strictly done pretty much what you described, which is play with other people, play along to songs, you know. And then I went to school, all of a sudden I studied like this whole concept of like, oh, there's this weird sticking that I've never done. And then after a while you could do it on the snare or whatnot, but now you're like, and now what? You know, now what I do with this thing, right? So he got me to do that, to kind of take stickings of rudiments or various, you know, patterns, and just kind of be like, okay, now I'm going to move one hand to the tom and move one hand to my whatnot, you know, and just kind of see it. Some stuff sounds shit, other stuff sounds great. I was just kind of trying things, and so I stumble upon this thing where, with the slam accent, which is basically a triplet pattern with a slam on each first triplet, I realized that when you move that accent, the first hit on the hat, and keep everything else on the snare, you know, it kind of sounds like a blast, because you have this continuous triplet on the snare, and then you have a hat like it goes over it, you know. Not properly a blast beat, because purists will say like a blast beat has to have every hit on each hand, you know. So
right.
Now I'm having breaks, you know, in between the hi-hat hits, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But, you know, anyway, I was like, this is cool. If I just put double kick underneath, that kind of plays the same thing as the hands are doing on the snare, and then, you know, now it kind of sounds like this beat, right?
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh, this is cool, and I didn't think anything of it, but I liked it, and started practicing it that way. And then with my band Scarve, we had done a demo, and then we were gearing up to do this mini album at the time. This came out, and I think we recorded in early '96, or not later that same year, like a self-produced thing. Which my parents, by the way, I remember helped us record that and supported us financially to be able to do
nice.
it. And we didn't really have any money. That's how supportive they were. So
amazing.
Yeah, just amazing. And we had a song on there with kind of a triplet riff, and I was like, "Ooh, this is my chance to see if this thing will fit." So as we were working on the song, kind of writing it, that became part of it. A song called "Shelly's Dead," which I believe the lyric was. Our singer at the time wrote, was based on the Crow movie, but Shelly's Dead title. So anyway, that became a thing. You know, this is way back like '96, and again, this is way before, obviously, you know, YouTube and all those things. I didn't think anything of it, but over time, I started using it more. I used it like, you know, in later Scarf records. I used it in the Soilwork. I used it like here and there when it fit, you know, Sidebreed, whatever recordings I were doing. Sometimes it became a tool, like with Sidebreed, a good example. They're a Swiss band. I recorded an album with them, which recently actually turned 14 years old. Came out in 2007 called Untitled, and they had a song that they sent to me, like, you know, among the songs that I was to record for the album, and it had 280 BPM blast, like, programmed, you know, because they robbed the main guy of the band who wrote a lot of the music, like, was really good at programming drums. And I was like 280, like at the time, this is 2006, you know. I was like, there's no way, like I can't even barely play 230 at the time. It was probably really hard for me to keep up, you know. That was really fast at the time. So now it's like everybody's playing 300, but you know.
Yeah, it baffles me. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, at the time I wasn't really paying attention much to BPMs either. I I just got the demo. I was like, this is ridiculous. I can never keep both my hands moving at this pace, you know. So I was like, Dirk Blast it is. And it's a really, you know, the riff has some really weird accentuations in it. So I had to kind of modify it to fit with and do some doubles here and there to kind of make it work. But so it became this go-to thing where like, okay, when people want me to do extremely fast stuff, that's too fast for me to do like an irregular blast or whatever. I'll just use this, you know.
Nice.
Anyway, long story short, so over time it became this thing where people started asking me about it. And my wife said, you should make a video. I'm like, okay, cool, I can do that. And she's like, hey, you should call it Dirk Blast. And I'm like, what now? He's like, yeah, you should like put your stamp on it. I mean, it's something you genuinely came up with, you know, that you know, sure, other people have done similar stuff over the years, you know, which since I've heard people say like, oh, this guy did it something similar in jazz in the 60s. I'm like, yeah, just like everything, there were blast beats in jazz in the 60s too. So,
yeah,
you know, just listen to the Max Roach versus Buddy Rich famous like drum duo album. There's blast beats there, you know. But anyway, so the point was, she was like, you should kind of, you know, make this a thing that's like your thing, you know. And I'm like, you think? I felt like I was kind of like, it was like too pretentious, and like, not gonna like, you know, put it in the face of the world that I made this great drum invention or so. Anyway, of course she was right, as usual. I was wrong, you know. I went ahead with it. I said, fine, I'll call it the Dirk Blast. And then now it's like people know me for this, you know.
Yeah.
And the shirts and, you know, and the video gets like a lot of views, and it's cool. I mean, it's not, for me, it's not something like, hey, look at me, you know. I'm not like that anyway. It's more like, here's a cool thing, you know, maybe you can use this and make it your own. I've seen people do lots of variations on it over time, which I do as well, like that, you know, which I've never done videos about, but it's just fun, you know. It's just, as a drummer, it's just kind of a fun thing, and that's really it.
But like I said, I don't play much music that requires that, but it made me feel like, oh, this is something I could potentially put into my playing. So I might get it back on next week and try and work it out. But it was fun, and it had, I felt like it had a lot more life to it than what I preconceived a normal blast beat. So I think, because it must have had some, I don't know what the right word is, but yeah, it just I felt something from it. So that was cool, man. So yeah, check the video out, guys. It's not hard to find if you want to search for it. Is there any Dirk blasting on the new Megadeth album? Have you managed to squeeze any in?
Oh man, that's a big question right there, Dave. That's a big question.
I know no one's heard it yet, but I'm not asking about what's the song title.
I'm gonna say wait and see.
Okay, yeah, man. We're all. I think we're all looking forward to hearing that when it eventually comes out. I should have checked. I don't know. Is there a release date or anything for it yet?
Not yet.
No. Okay.
I'm fairly confident it's gonna come out. You know, hopefully early next year at some point. Exactly when, I don't know. That's just kind of my personal hunch. So nothing official there. But
no, nothing official. Yeah. Okay.
It's moving along well. So,
cool.
And I think people are going to be really excited with it. I know we are. So.
Oh, definitely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's gonna be huge. It's gonna be massive. And yeah, I can't wait to hear it. So what else I was going to ask? So we always talk about, and I've had a few injuries from drumming. Do you have any specific warm-ups or workouts that you do before a show or before a session that you think would be useful to share with the listeners?
Absolutely. I got injured a few times when I was younger, and I got into this routine of stretching before each show.
Yeah.
Which my wife, who's the CrossFit instructor, as well as my good friend Mike Heller, who plays drums in Fear Factory and also in Raven, does a lot of session work as well. Lives here in LA too. He also helped me get started with stretches. He had a good little routine that he did when. This was actually the tour when I got the call from Megadeth. We were touring the US with Fear Factory in Soilwork. And so him and I would do our stretches together for the show. So he kind of helped me get started with that as well. And the stretching is just really good because over time, you know, as much as it can be tough in the beginning if you've never stretched really or done any yoga stuff, over time it really has a massive impact on your flexibility. Which is, when you think about it as a drummer, especially as you get older, that's the thing that's going to become a problem because you know, I mean, I'm sure you know it, like you're reaching for symbols, you know, you're doing fills, you're twisting your body, and then sometimes there's the visual element, which now, for example, in my case with Megadeth, we play usually pretty big stages. If I just sit and play, it's going to be boring. So I try to do, like, you know, Tommy Lee stuff, whatever. You know, I add some visuals to make it kind of fun. Of course, Nick Menza, you know, among others, set a great precedent there. So I have some moves in tribute to him as well, and what you know he used to do on those specific songs. Anyway, the stretches are just a massive help for me in that, you know, to just kind of get ready for the show.
Yeah.
And someday I'll probably make a video about them and post it, like kind of what my stretching routine is. But and in general, just you know, to avoid injuries, look, it's really simple in my book. It's like you got to be healthy. I'm sure you and any drummer listening to this can relate. You know, when you play rock music, any form, not just extreme metal, it's an athletic endeavor. You know, to be on stage for any length of time. Like even if you play a 30-minute set sometimes and you go for it, it's usually a shorter set. You cram as many songs in there as you can.
Yeah.
You know, to make it worthwhile for yourself and for the fans who are going to see you. So it's like nonstop cardio and exercise for that amount of time. And if you don't take care of yourself, you can probably get away with it in your 20s to some degree. You know, I know I did. Got injured a few times, but still mostly got away with partying and not really doing much of warming up, you know, here and there. But but as you get older, you know, I'm 46 now, turning 47 in a few months. You know, you better take care of yourself or it's not going to happen. You know, you're going to have serious issues. And so, I try to get a lot of sleep, especially when I'm on tour. You know, like I'm just sleeping like 9-10 hours a night, you know, which is way more than at home. But I could, and I was like, hey, I'm going to get to sleep. I'm going to be rested so that I have energy for the show.
Yeah. It's really important.
Healthy, you know. Yeah, super important, right? People forget about the resting part, but really your body needs to recuperate, especially when you're on the road for a length of time. And, you know, you get battered after a while, like 5-6 weeks of playing, you know, every night or every other night, you're going to start feeling it, right? So, and just, you know, eating healthy too. Like personally, I've been, you know, vegan for a long time now. That's massively helped me, you know, make my body healthy and just feel a consistent flow of energy throughout the day. So for me, that's been a really good change. You know, I remember how I used to feel when I was eating all kinds of stuff that I don't eat anymore. Not just meat and dairy, but just, you know, a lot of crap and just really not paying attention, you know, eating chips and candy and, you know, just all kinds of, which I still do occasionally. I'm just way more careful with it, you know. So it's just, you know, the biggest advice is just kind of be aware that your body is, you know, needs care when you do this.
Not indestructible.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, I knew you were a vegan, and it's something I think 3 years. I've been vegan for 3 years.
Oh, cool.
So but I've noticed a massive change. Like it's difficult to explain, isn't it? For when you go from eating meat and dairy and stuff, you kind of get used to how you feel with that. But it's not until you stop putting all that stuff in your body that you realize, I can actually feel quite good every day. and when you're right about energy levels and digestion and things like that, it's like I think people think I'm making it up a lot. So it's great to talk to you about this publicly, because obviously people who are not vegans or whatever, or vegetarians or whatever, a lot of them kind of think, maybe don't take it so seriously in terms of the health benefits of it.
Right.
And I know not everyone is vegan for that reason, which, you know, or plant-based or whatever the other term they use or whatever. But I definitely feel 100% more than 100% better every single day, just from not eating that stuff. And you know, I must say, I try not to talk, like, we don't talk about it a lot on the podcast, but I think you're probably my first guest vegan, maybe. So thank you.
Nice.
But yeah, no, it's great. It's great. Yeah. So, you know, I'm still, I guess, fairly early in it, but I've been dedicated to it. And, you know, my band members are always cool on the road, and you're always trying to make sure there's some stuff on the rider and things like that. But it's kind of being the only one is hard. So I don't know if you've been in that situation or whether you've been in bands with when other members are eating the same stuff as you. I guess makes it easier. But that's the difficult thing for me is the traveling aspect. Sometimes it can certain countries maybe haven't caught on as well as other countries, and when you're stuck at a petrol station or a gas station or whatever, and there's literally nothing apart from potato chips or whatever or Oreos. And like, yeah, that stuff isn't good, but you know, you can have a little bit, can't you? You can have a little bit.
That can definitely be tricky as a touring musician, you know. But I'm glad to hear you're vegan as well, man. Because for me, it's like, you know, look, nobody wants to be told what to do, right? And I'm the first person I'll say that, you know, like, don't tell me what to do, or I'll do the opposite. You know, I still have that kind of like ingrained in me from my youth, I guess, like this rebel attitude. Oh, you want me to do that? Fuck you, you know.
Well, so I think everyone has that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not running around preaching and telling people what they should do. But what I found is that, you know, just doing it has inspired more people than I can probably think of right now to switch their eating habits to become either vegetarian or even vegan, you know, which is mind blowing because, again, I don't walk around preaching about it. For me, it's very much, you know, the reasoning behind it for me is very much militant. It's very much nothing to do with health, actually, and very much against factory farming and the way we treat the planet and animals. I'm 100% radically against that. So I can get pretty heated about that if somebody challenges that part of it, because I'll be like, no, that's just wrong in my view.
Yeah.
But that's my reason why I went towards that. The health benefits are just this, like you described, this beautiful bonus of like, wow, I feel a trillion times better. My energy is consistent. My body feels healthy. I can play drums way better than I used to. You know, it's amazing, and it's not supposed to be the case because I'm older. I'm supposed to struggle more, and it's actually easier for me now than it used to be. You know? So that's crazy. But yeah, you know, just doing it can inspire change, and just showing people, because a lot of people are intrigued by it, and then they'll start asking you questions. You know, it kind of happened with Kiko that way. Kiko is pretty much, I wouldn't say he's like full on vegan per se, but 90% vegan. You know,
that's interesting.
So, and that happened because after I joined the band, and I was vegan at the time, and I had just started actually. Before that, I was vegetarian for many years.
Okay.
Just started cutting out dairy just with all the options that are available now. It's like it's easy, you know.
Yeah.
So he started asking me about it, and so how do you get your protein, and how do you this and that, and you know. I started trying it, and like, let me try this, let me try that, and now he's like on the road eating tofu and tempeh and lots of vegetables, and I'm like, wow, like, you know, this is without me ever saying, you know, you should consider being vegan. You know?
Yeah, no, that's interesting actually, because I think people have probably seen the odd meme online, or they've been told to watch this movie, and I think it's difficult to get people to kind of watch movies, because that was the thing that really made me say I'm going to make this change. Like, me and my wife did it together. Be like, we really want to do this, don't we? And we were like, yeah, we need to try it. But it was the movies that really made us do it. And but yeah, I think people are there's an element of people that are not interested at all, which is fine. And then there's I guess a small population of people that kind of feel like it probably is the best thing to do. I wouldn't know where to start. It seems like it's going to be too much of a change. It's going to be too hard. So I think this people learning that other people around them are doing it and they find it easy, makes them try things and just ask questions, and like, it's never been easier to do. Obviously, it's becoming, you know, every couple of months, like, my supermarkets are being filled up with more new stuff that didn't exist before, and stuff like that. And it's just, you know, especially in the US and the UK, and I think Germany's pretty easy. I don't know about the rest of Europe in comparison, but yeah, it's never been easier. But anyway, let's not talk about veganism anymore. So I don't want people to switch off. But give it a, you know, it's all good. But yeah, it's nice to talk to another human about it, another drummer about it as well, and how it's helped. Right. So I've got a few questions from I've got a Patreon page, so one of the benefits of one of the tiers is that they get to ask my guests questions. If you don't mind, I've got a few questions.
No,
Is that okay? Oh, cool.
500, yeah.
Great. So the first one is from Kenny Kendrick, who's another drummer. I think he's a big Megadeth fan as well. Who is your favorite past Megadeth drummer?
Oh, great question, Kenny. Well, that's a hard question, but I have to go with Gar Samuelson just because he's the first one I heard, and that carries sentimental value to me. On top of the fact that Gar was just a very unique drummer. As I learned his parts, now being in the band, I have to study in detail like what he did. It made me realize even more how unique his approach was, and how he had these very unique rhythms, like this kind of stuttering rhythm that sounds almost like a double bass rhythm, but isn't quite a double bass rhythm. And then there's this fill that's actually very comparable to what a Dirk Blast is. It has less snare drums. There's this thing where he goes between a crash and a snare and puts the kick underneath the crash, which he uses a lot. So yeah, I just thought, wow, I remember buying these songs on vinyl at the time without really knowing who Megadeth was. I just found it secondhand and thought the cover looked really badass. So I had to buy it. Probably bought it for like $2 or something like that, and came home and put it on. I remember just being floored by not just by the music and the band in general, which was of course like wow, but just the drumming just seemed really different to me, and it just seemed like Gar had something else going on than the other drummers I already knew at the time, which wasn't that many. But so yeah, of course I love Nick Menza, and I love all the drummers that have been in the band. At some point, they've all brought their own style, but Gar stands out to me.
Cool. Great answer there. I guess we've touched on this a little bit. This next one's from Paul Hutchins. The range of artists you've played with is huge. Devin Townsend, Royal Dane, Dave Mustaine, plus all the various bands you've been in. What have been the biggest challenges when switching from project to project?
Wow, that's a good question, Paul. I think it's just a learning process about finding out what a specific project needs, which ranges very wildly from do whatever you want to do exactly this and anything in between,
Yeah.
And which is kind of the fun part about it. It's part of the things that I like about playing with different people is that it's never the same thing, right? And for instance, I'll draw an easy comparison between, say, Megadeth and, let's say, World Dane. So with Megadeth, obviously, there's this huge legacy. And I know as a fan, when I go see Megadeth live, I want to see the songs the way they are. I don't want to see some guy who thinks he's like better than all the drummers that have been in the band before and puts like blast beats in all the songs and stuff. Not that would fly with it anyway, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like I know what that means. So I go in there and I really try to do the songs justice in the original compositions. I know, knowing Dave, how much thought went into that, and that none of that stuff is by chance. Everything's there for a reason. So I really stick closely, very closely to the original drums. Of course, there's little flourishes here and there that I add in over time and that become part of it. But, on the other hand, you go to something like, let's say, World Dane, which was a session recording I did, where Peter Richards, my then, bandmate in Soilwork, was writing most of the music and also producing the records. So I went in and it was basically a blank slate. So here's a song, let's check it out. I think, let's try this kind of beat, let's try that kind of thing. And then, maybe let's try something different here and just kind of working your way through it. So that's like the complete opposite approach where it's like, let's just try stuff and see what happens. And there wasn't any previous legacy there because Worrell had, obviously worked with Sanctuary and Nevermore, but hadn't really done a solo record before. So other than there's going to be this amazing voice there, it was between me and Peter to kind of figure out what he had in mind when he wrote the songs for Worrell. And again, that's the beauty of it. As a musician, when you get to explore, that's one of the most fun things. And even with my own music. You know, I have my own band called Band C where I play drums and also guitar, and I write all the music and the lyrics, etc., etc. It's about exploring. It's about, you know, let's try this and see what happens. You know, that to me is very, very exciting. And so I'll just sit down and improvise something on drums and record it, and then see if I can turn that into a song. You know,
Nice. That's how
it's
you do
very
it.
backwards.
No,
You
I
know,
like that.
most
I like that.
people start with riffs, right?
Yeah.
So, but I like to do it the other way around because I'm like, okay, I play guitar. I'm not a great guitarist at all. I could barely call myself a guitar player. I use it mostly for writing and recording my own stuff. But I'm a drummer. Yeah, that I know really how to do. So I'll just start with drums.
That's a great
Anyway, I hope
idea.
that answered your question, Paul.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's it. And I dabble in the other instruments as well. Obviously, with the, got a guitar and a bass and stuff.
Yeah.
I never fancied myself as a vocalist, mind. But in terms of songwriting, it's not something I've since I was a teenager. I did when I was a teenager dabble and I wrote some songs. But that could be a good way of doing it. Start with the drums and then add stuff on top. So yeah, I might give that a try and see what comes out the other end. I'll definitely need a singer though. So if anyone wants to sing on my album, drop me an email. But yeah, I know. I don't know. It's this deep voice. Unless I want everything to sound like Barry White, I can do Barry White quite well. He's my karaoke song. So
Now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, man. It's funny. Right. Oh, this is another one from Paul Hutchins, actually. So I'm letting him have two. This is something I haven't actually had a chance to look into. So I'm glad he's asking this. You are part of the Metal Against Coronavirus project, which seems to involve about 1 million musicians. It would be good to hear about that. I don't know what that is.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about it. I just know that they contacted me. Well, I guess this was a few months after the pandemic kind of hit and we were all locked down at home. And so they were putting together a project. They already had a bunch of people enlisted if I wanted to be part of it, and they're donating part of the money to research, related to coronavirus. So I figured, hey, this is a great cause. I'm sitting at home. I have time. I knew some of the people that had already said yes, so that to me was enough to be okay. This is cool, and so they sent me a song, and which was released I think maybe a month ago or a little more months. I forget, but it's
cool.
just been good to see people come together. I think one of the beautiful things, in a broader sense, not just with this project, that you can get being quote unquote famous, is that you can use your voice to do good, and that's really something that I hold close to my heart, because with rock stardom comes like this side dish of this cocktail of like personal wealth and all that stuff. And while I love being able to pay my bills doing my job, personally, I'm not the kind of guy who wants to have like 12 Lamborghinis in the driveway and all that stuff. I mean, sure, I'd love to go drive a Lamborghini on a racetrack one day, like any, boy, I guess, growing up with Ferrari posters in my bedroom. But that's about as far as that goes for me. I again, to go back to what I was talking about earlier with my mom and all that stuff, you realize that things are just things. The real value of life for me, which I often tell people, lies in human relationships, the things we share together, whether it's our passion for music or art or any form of anything, the beauty of the world around us, nature, not very metal stuff to say maybe of me, but that's how I feel, man. Deep inside, like that's true beauty for me, and that's true worth, and no money can buy that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to be able to use my platform to support something like research for coronavirus vaccine at the time, obviously when this started, we were far from having a vaccine, and there's always things to be funded when it comes to something like this. Or for that instance, I post a lot about animals too, because that's something that I hope goes to my heart. The state of the planet, what's going on with whether or not you believe this or that. Like, it's undeniable that there's a lot that could be improved on the planet. So those are things that I'm very happy to, put my quote unquote fame to use, because I do have people paying attention, I do have people looking, and that's great. Like, that's actually, I can maybe bring about even a little bit of positive change.
Yeah.
Even if one person among all my followers goes like, you know what, I'm going to donate to this animal sanctuary, like I'm going to give them $20. That's wonderful. I couldn't be happier.
That's amazing, man. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thanks. Now I'll check that song out that you did then. Actually, that sounds good. One from Dean Monahan. He's in the States as well. What size sticks and brand do you use?
Dean, excellent. I've been using Tama sticks for a very long time. I can't remember exactly when I started. And they are basically 2Bs. So in Tama lingo, they're called 216Bs, but that's just their own way of naming it. And they are made of Japanese oak, so they're quite, I wouldn't say they're like super heavy sticks, because I've definitely tried heavier ones, but they're very hard sticks, so they're pretty durable, which I like.
Yeah.
I play ring shot, so I used to, when I was playing hickory and things like that, I used to just destroy sticks like by the minute, and at the time I was paying for them too, so that sucked. So I was really looking for a stick to kind of resist the rim shot and the intense playing, and just the sheer amount of hits you get when you're playing blast beats and death metal and stuff. It gets pretty crazy. So these sticks have proven to be just very durable and great, and it took a long time, but they're finally being distributed worldwide. It was kind of, I think, a side thing for Tama to do sticks for many years.
Yeah.
But they've taken it to the next level a couple of years ago. So you can find them probably, you can request them at your local dealer. I know they're distributed in the States.
Great.
I also sell signed ones on my website and stuff, on my web store. So.
Oh, there you go. That's great. I definitely remember trying Tama oak sticks when I was a kid. Not that size, but they must have been available somewhere. And I've tried them down the line. I do remember them being, they lasted a long time, so that's good. So, no, cool. I didn't know you used those, but it totally makes sense as to why you would, and they seem to do the job, so that's all you need.
Yep.
This is the last Patreon question from Mark Porter, who's in Wales like me. What are your top 5 Megadeth songs to play live?
Great question, Mark. Listen, it kind of changes, but okay, top 5. Definitely Wake Up Dead is in there.
Cool.
Super fun song to play. First song I ever heard by the band, because as I was saying earlier, I bought 2 songs and threw the needle on that, and that came up. So
nice.
Instantly hit me. Just a great lyric too, and it's just it's just a classic Megadeth song for me. It has a very unusual structure, which a lot of Megadeth songs do.
Yeah,
it's just fun. The grooves are just great. I love playing Hangar 18, which is usually the song we open with. It's a great opening track for a show. Of course, the fast stuff, like come on, like Rattlehead, Mechanics. That's a joy on drums, right? So
yeah.
Those are like not always in our set, but when they are, I always, it's a good challenge. But on the other hand, a song like something more from the current, well, maybe not current, but something more from the modern era of the band, like Trust or Attila Moment.
Trust. I love Trust, man.
Yeah. Those songs are iconic in a different way, and it's fun. It's really fun to try and replicate all the little details of what Nick did on that song, for example. There's a lot of little things that, and you learn about a drummer's playing that way too. You learn about how he's thinking, and in this case also Dave, because I know Dave Mustaine is very involved with all the details on every song. Now having done a recording with him, I know how much he doesn't just listen to like the guitar and his vocals or something, but really cares about all the small details.
Great.
So it's for me, that's fun, to just kind of be like, this is the way this was intended to be, and I'm gonna just put all my swing I can summon into that every night. So yeah, those are some of my favorites.
No, awesome, man. Thanks so much for that.
Sure.
Just before we end, I know we've gone on fairly long, so thanks for your time. I do a quick fire round. So it's just 10 questions. You answer as quick as you can. I'm going to add an 11th question today because I've decided this morning I'm going to add one. So if that's cool. So do you prefer hot or cold weather?
Oh, well, definitely hot. I'm here in LA, so that tells me something.
That tells me something exactly, yeah. I wish I was in LA right now. Daytime or nighttime?
I would say daytime, actually. I like to be, even though I often fail at it, I like to be an early riser and enjoy the
Cool.
evening party.
Cool. Sweet or savory?
Oh, that's extremely hard to answer. Can I say both?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, why not? Yeah, whatever. Cool. Guitar or bass?
Uh, Probably guitar, since I also play that. I mean, I add bass to my demos too, but I usually hand it off to someone who can actually play bass.
Cool, man. All good. Nylon or wood tip drumsticks?
Wood tip for sure. Tried the nylon in the past, but I hate it when they go flying and then you're stuck with a useless.
I know. I haven't tried one for years and years, but I remember when I was a kid and I used to buy different drumsticks all the time just to try them out. That always used to happen, and I'm like, why? Why haven't they improved this yet? So they
Exactly.
stay on. I don't know. This is always a tough one. John Bonham or Neil Peart?
Oh, well, without sounding disrespectful here, because that's really not my point. For me, that's not so tough. I would definitely go with John Bonham for two simple reasons. One of the reasons is that I never really listened to Rush over the years.
Okay.
The other reason being that John Bonham's style just speaks more to me personally, but that, again, I just want to make it clear that I'm not disrespecting Neil in any way and his legacy. I mean, incredible drummer, and obviously he's on the cover of magazines for a reason. I've since grown to enjoy some of their music a lot and have done covers and nothing but respect. But I always go back to like what kind of fueled me as a person growing up to become a drummer and to remain a drummer and to go for it. And my dad early on played Neil at some point, and so Bonham has always had like a soft spot in my heart for all of these reasons.
No, that's quite a familiar, I think, thought with a lot of people, but including myself, really. So but thanks. Sorry for asking.
No worries.
Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Well, I'm kind of partial to the Stones. They're my wife's favorite band,
right?
And she's begged me to see them. Growing up, I heard more Beatles because my dad's a huge Beatles fan, and so were some of my friends, and so I heard a lot of their stuff. Obviously, amazing as well. But somehow the dirty, gritty, nasty rock and roll vibe of the Stones,
yeah, man,
seems a bit less, dare I say, pretentious in ways, and a bit more, let's jam together and put on a good vibe, So that's, again, no disrespect to the Beatles at all, because how could you disrespect the Beatles?
No, exactly.
I'll go with Stones.
No, that's good. Good answer. Clear or coated drum heads? I didn't ask what you
definitely
used.
clear on the toms. Just suits the style I play.
Do you have a favorite model that you normally use then on your toms? The Evans model?
Live, I'll use the double ply heads like EC2, which are Evans EC2, which are a bit more durable. They'll carry me through at least a couple of shows.
Cool.
In the studio, I tend to go for thinner heads, just because in the studio it makes more sense to be able to have more of that sustain and warmth.
Yeah.
I don't think in a live show you're going to hear much of that.
You want durability during a show, don't you? And cool. That's interesting. Big or small venue?
Oh man, I love the intimacy of having the crowd really up close. It's something I always miss on big stages. I love the big shows. We just did 20 something of it.
Yeah.
And but I'm always like 15 meters away from the crowd, if not more, and or 20 years. I don't know. It's probably, I don't know. I'm starting to think in feet now. I've lived here too long. But it's like, it's weird, you know. It's like, as much as it's great to have all this space and to have this gigantic show, like as a drummer, you do feel quite isolated from everything and everyone. So
yeah, I can.
Kind of in your own little bubble. And one time I got to play. Sorry, this is going to be a longer answer now, but we did a gig at St. Vitus with Megadeth in 2016, which is a small 250 capacity club in New York.
Oh,
It was kind of like an underground gig. We were billed as Dick and the Rattleheads, which I guess they used to do shows like that back in the day, like warm-up gigs, like secret gigs. You know, so
yeah,
they went, you know, we had an opportunity to do it in between other stuff, so they wanted to do that. The gig is actually on YouTube now. That was so fun for me because, as much as, you know, there was no backstage, you know, the area where we got changed was a nasty, filthy basement, and you know, you had all those bad points. But then being on stage felt like, in my mind, I was like, you know, wow, this must be what it was like to play in Megadeth in 1985. You know, with Dave Mustaine almost like up on my bass drum, and then the crowd right there. It was so cool. I loved it.
Oh, that would have been amazing. Oh, I'll check that out. I didn't know that existed. That's so cool. Cool. Favorite time signature to play that isn't 4/4?
Haha. I've been working a lot on 5.
Okay.
In the recent years. I'm very intrigued, so I'll say 5/4. You know, there's
Cool.
Obviously you can take the whole time signature concept way down the rabbit hole, and some of my favorite drummers like Morgan Ogren really are amazing at that. But yeah, 5. I'm at 5 right now. That's a good place for me to kind of, you know, get better at that.
Nice. And the one I've just added today, just out of interest, who's your favorite drummer of all time?
Can I pick 12? No. You know, again, it changes. Like, there's so many great drummers, but even just sticking with one of the most influential ones to me is very difficult, because there have been a few, you know, that just were really instrumental, you know, and then even somebody like, you know, as I'm thinking about, like, even someone like Prince, you know, like Prince was the first guy that compelled me enough to want to buy a vinyl. And he played drums on most of his stuff, you know, not on all of it, but on a lot of the early stuff is just him, you know, going in and doing kind of pretty much what we were just talking about, which is like, I have the sign, let me lay down the drums and then I'll put all the instruments on top, you know.
Nice. Yeah.
That guy. And 3 hours later, you have like When Doves Cry or some other hit, you know. So, you know, I could say Prince basically, but I'll stick with, you know, I gotta stick with Dave Lombardo, just because I think, you know, when I heard those beats on, like, you know, Rain and Blood and South of Heaven specifically, you know, also the previous records and the latter records, but those 2 specifically, I think just really, I was like so pumped. You know, as a teenager, it gave me this energy every time I put that stuff on. I wanted to, like, you know, just take on the world.
Amazing. I'd love to get Dave on one day. It would be great as well. So I'll have to.
Oh man, yeah.
I haven't hit him up yet.
Guy, man.
Yeah,
you should really definitely get him on.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be cool. Right, and so this is the end of the podcast. But I ask everyone this question, so apologies in advance. If you could start your own band with yourself on drums, not including members of Megadeth or Soilwork, who would you have playing the other instruments? Dead, and they can be dead or alive.
Okay. I love this.
Sorry.
Okay. I gotta try and do something that makes sense, but man, you know, some of my favorite people are like I would love to do something with Justin from Godflesh. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with this band.
I know the name of the band, but yeah, I don't know their music, to be honest with you. No.
Yeah. He was briefly in Napalm Death at the time when they did their first album. He plays on the A side, and then went on to do, like, he has a million different projects and different styles of music. He's one of those guys, but he's an amazing composer. So I think Justin would be great. You know. This is totally not going to fit, but on this other guitar great Frederick from the Sugar, who was a good friend of mine, but just somebody who I've had amazing jam sessions with, and just a sweet guy and an absolute genius, and, just out of this world, talented. So I don't know how those two would work together, but you can figure that out later.
Oh yeah, don't worry about that.
Right.
Yeah.
And then on bass, I'd probably, I've had the chance to play with some amazing bass players. Like I've done a lot of stuff with Steve DiGiorgio, and he's a good friend of mine too. He's one of the best out there, if not the best, But I've also worked a lot with Shane Embury. We have a bunch of projects together. He actually plays in my band, and so I bring Shane probably just because he's a lovely guy and just somebody I grew up listening to and love him. So now I have to come up with a vocalist, right? Oh my god.
Yeah, that's always difficult.
This is gonna be tough, man. This is gonna be really tough. Oh, I know. I'll bring another friend of mine, Devin Townsend, just because he can sing anything. He can sing melodic, rock vocals. And he's just also a genius and an absolutely lovely guy. And, I think that would be the most important thing for me, working with people and just be like who they are as musicians, but who they are as people, which rhymes very true for when to agree being in bands with people, you got to get along with them.
Of course, yeah. I think that's half the most important thing is, they've got to be decent at their instrument, but getting along with them is, especially when it comes to touring, I think is arguably more important.
Yes,
to some degree. If you want to keep the thing moving and keep it going, I think you need to have that relationship. And I think and sometimes you don't jamming in a room together is great, but until you go on the road and spend all those hours on buses or in vans or planes or whatever, I think that's when you realize if you get on with someone or not. So it's all a learning curve. It's all a learning curve. This rock and roll stuff, and fortunately, I've always got on with everyone I've been in bands with. So I'm very lucky. So I'm sure
that's probably one of the reasons why you're here today. I always think that about myself too. Like if you're able to fit in and make the other band members feel comfortable about what you bring to the table, then. You have a good chance of getting it.
Well, hopefully they feel the same way about me. Anyway, I don't know. I was talking about them, but I know. I guess I'm still doing it. It's difficult in my band because most of us are families. So there's my dad and my two brothers are in my band, and then we've always had a singer that isn't related. So I guess we have to get on. But I guess we do have those kind of family, brotherly little squabbles every now and again. But it's always
that's beautiful though, man. In a band with your family members, that must be a very unique feeling.
Yeah, it is amazing, and it's like I've mentioned this a lot of times, and I know my dad is really proud of playing with us, and it's great for us to kind of spend the quality time together with our dad that we missed a lot when we were young because he was touring with Motorhead for about 32 years. So my entire life he was kind of away a lot. So it's great now. We had 18 hours in an airport the other day to spend together. we had an issue with the flight, so we were stuck in Paris to go to the airport for 18 hours. So that was quality time.
Not the most fun one to be stuck in either, Darcy.
No, absolutely not. I don't think any airport is fun. But but that was definitely a horrific day. But anyway, I just wanted to thank you really for doing this. I know it went a little bit longer than I predicted, but it's because you've been such a great guest, and I really appreciate your time. And I wish you well with the future with Megadeth. I really look forward to hearing the new album. I'm sure pretty much anyone that is into metal music is looking forward to that. To see what you guys come up with. And it's just been great. And hopefully people will learn a lot from this. They'll be interested in what you had to say. Check out some of maybe the earlier stuff you mentioned and some of your YouTube stuff and your website. And so, just thanks again, man, and for being a great person. And hopefully, if not before, I'll catch up with you at Grass Pop Festival 2022. We can share a vegan burger or something like that, maybe.
Hey, that's a plan.
That would be cool. Yeah, that'd be great, man. Cool. Well, yeah. Thanks again, and have a great day in LA, and enjoy the sunshine. And I'm going to go to bed now, so I'll make sure this saves on my laptop, okay? And I'm gonna hit the hay. But
Thanks so much, Dave. Really
thanks.
appreciate your time and amazing interview, man. I had a blast. So
I'm glad you enjoyed as well, and yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you, and yeah, let's speak soon and keep in touch.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'll send you my cell phone number too once once we're done with this. When we are at Dress Pop, we can connect. Make sure that we can say hi in the flesh. That'd be great.
That'd be amazing. Okay, thanks, Dirk. That's amazing. Right, speak to you soon.
Yeah,
cheers.
All right, you take care.
Yeah. Bye now.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Drum for the Song podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Drum for the Song podcast. If you've enjoyed this, please consider liking the video and subscribing if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcasts. If you could leave me a review or comment, that would be fantastic too, as it helps other people discover this show. Please also consider sharing this with any family members or friends who might enjoy the content. You can also follow me on social media at Dane_drums or at Drum for the Song, or search for Drum for the Song on Facebook to follow the page and join the official Facebook group. If you'd like to support the podcast, you could purchase some merchandise from drumforthesong.com, or consider supporting me via Patreon from just £3 per month for additional exclusive content like bonus episodes, video calls with myself, competitions, discounts, and much more. Any additional support is always greatly appreciated, but I would like to give extra special thanks to my top tier Groove Master patrons, whose names are listed in the description below. My name is Dane Campbell, and thanks so much for watching or listening this far. If you're a drummer, don't forget to drum for the song.